So welcome everybody to Clay Art Centre. My name is Regina Farrell-Fagan. I am the exhibitions manager at Clay Art Centre, and I'm here with you today to present Sana Musasama. We're very excited to have her today. We're broadcasting live, not from Clay Art Centre because we're closed at the moment. Sana is here. She's a graduate of City College and Alfred, both in New York, her MFA from Alfred University. Sana is a ceramicist, mixed media artist, educator, and a human rights advocate. Before I hand things over to Sana, let me give you a little information about Clay Art Centre. Many of you are familiar with us, some of you are not, so I just want to tell you a little bit more about us. We are located in Portchester, which is a little over 20 miles north of New York City, in Westchester County. We are a nationally recognized nonprofit ceramic arts organization. Our facility offers studio rental, education for all levels, artists in residence programs, exhibitions, and a shop, as well as a robust community arts program. I'm just going to share our mission with everybody right now. 1 second. So Clay Art Centre, believing strongly that the arts have the ability to touch and enrich lives, Clay Art Centre's mission is to offer a stimulating space for studio practice, exhibition, and educational opportunities to better serve the community. I just wanted to share that with you all. I'm just going to stop sharing right now. I think we have nearly everybody in, so I'm going to hand it over to Sana and just So Sana is here today to talk about her work. She's specifically going to talk about the Apron Project, as well as her travels, her development as an artist, her journeys. She's had a very interesting life. I'm very excited to hear what she has to say, and I'm sure everybody else is too. Sana, like I said, received her BA from City College in New York and her MFA from Alfred University, and then she began to travel. I'm going to put you back with Sana right now. Just bear with me. You can take it away, Sana.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm just delighted to be here to speak to you today. And two things I want to mention is you may see me moving around quite a bit, and it's because I have an injury with my back from online learning. And sitting 13 and 14 hours a day injured me, so I'm a little antsy. So bear with me on that. And the other thing is something that I always share with my students and friends over and over again, is that an artist makes their art for the world. In their studios, they may be private and alone for 13, 14 hours, sometimes 2 or 3 months alone in their studios. But the work that they're making is to present to the world, it's to an audience. And I feel incredibly, incredibly grateful that you're my audience this afternoon. Thank you. So I'm going to start off with showing early images of travel. And one of the reasons why I got on the road to travel is that I come from a family that my father made a career out of the military. And so growing up with my 4 sisters, I live in the house I grew up in. I have a studio in the backyard, hearing wonderful stories that my father would tell about around the world, having his friends come and visit us on Sundays in their different languages, their different cultures, their habits, their way of sitting, eating, greeting. All of that was so fascinating to me as a young person that when it came time to travel, it was something very, very easy to do. I did not grow up fearing difference. I grew up loving difference. So that difference that was around my dining room table every Sunday, different people stimulated me for world adventure and a fearlessness. And so right after my first degree from City College, instead of going into a graduate program where most of my friends were going, I decided to travel the world. And instead of entering a classroom, enter into the traditional lives of other people and test my way of growing up, my truths against theirs in the world. And an adventure started that I love as much as I love making work and breathing, and it's never stopped. So I'm going to go through a bunch of images and not overtalk you guys. Thank you. Next. So in traveling around the world, traditional cultures, gender is very, very restricted. So little girls became my companions. Their moms were too busy working and just couldn't understand this 22-year-old Black girl walking around the world without a husband or children. And so they entrusted their daughters with me. So all of these girls that you see are really adult women doing the work of adult women in the bodies of 9, 10, 11, and 12-year-olds. They're different tribes, they're different dialects, but they're all little girls. And they became my guide. And our roles switched. They became my mom, and I became their daughter. They protected me and loved me, and I loved them. Next. More little girls. Next. One of the first places I traveled was West Africa, and where I would go is to the markets. In the markets, you meet women. They're curious who you are as a woman. They love your independence. They think because they don't see you with a man, you're pure and clean, and they trust you, so they invite you into their lives. So I spend one day in a hotel getting prepared, and then I go right through the markets, and that's where I meet friends. Next. This is the House series, done over 35, 40 years ago. It's a body of work that I'm particularly proud of. I just brought it home from the Pyrex Gallery that was curated by Matt Nolan. It is work that was not mentored by academia. It was work that purely came from the heart and hand after having traveled in West Africa for 9 months. So I made about 60 of them over a period of 2 or 3 years. I work in series. I spend a long time on something because I'm researching, and these bodies of work that range from 3 feet to 7 feet, I'm particularly proud of. Next. More details of the House series. These are the Maple Tree series. And I would think that at this development and my work, it was probably the first time that I would say that I began to be more socially aware. Although we can look at the House series as being a social work because people live in houses. Houses are sacred places. This was a deliberate shift where I read about a story of how 3 groups of people used the maple tree as a social political symbol to speak out about the injustices of maple tree sapping and slaves and indentured servants. And I think it's the first body of work that propelled me to then think about telling something to an audience and a way of talking back. And the best way for me really to talk back as an artist was to make things more so than to use my mouth. Next. This is the installation of them that was at Dartmouth, where I was a fellow artist in maybe 2012. I produced about maybe 25, 30 of these over a period of 10 years. I stay with a series that long because it interests me that long. I'm passionate about it. I work in 3 and 4s at a time because each one of them is telling me what the other one needs and doesn't need. They're all kind of like a chorus line of voices. This was the first place and the only place that I probably had about 16 of them. I've never had an opportunity to show all of them. And when I left Dartmouth, I left 2 of the pieces there. And that also is something that speaks about an audience. You want your work to live beyond you, and museums collect work and protect it. And so that's another thing that when we talk about audiences is important. So 2 pieces are there, and right from here, you can see them. They're almost next to each other. It's the piece with the yellow body, and then the piece that's to my left, which is brown. Those 2 pieces belong to our Dartmouth. In fact, there's one more, but I don't have an image of it. Next. This is the Unknown, Unnamed series, and this is really sparked by having traveled to Cambodia and spending a lot of time on the killing fields. And then also an experience where I had many years ago working on the African American burial ground. And I just started talking about looking at life prior to the life that exists now, particularly walking through the killing fields when you're looking at skeletons of once were. And I wondered, who were these people? What were their passions? What did they want to be? Things like that. Next. Unknown, unnamed. And this is when I went on my first trip to Cambodia. And these were the signs that I saw, not the first year, but the second year. And I was glad to see them. And I have many more that I'm not showing you now, but I would look for one that would be in the front of the hotel or guest house. And I would know that that would be a guest house that would not turn into a brothel that late at night. I was traveling the first time with a friend who I worked with at Cases, which was a felony program. And her name is Jessica, and she was a therapist there. And she had such an easy manner working with the same kids that I worked with, where sometimes something would get volatile and she had a way of calming them down. And I watched it and I learned from her. I invited her to come to Cambodia with me the first trip because I didn't know that I could do anything in Cambodia. I just knew that I had this feeling that, having read the story about Somali mom, having been an indentured servant and having been a sex slave and other girls in captivity, even girls in our own culture, I just felt compelled to go. And so Jessica went with me, and I went to buy something from a kid on the street, and I did. And then she spoke to me not to buy from children on the street, because buying from a child on the street, Sana, makes them know they can always look at somebody to buy something from. And one day they'll come up against somebody who's not safe, and they'll offer to buy their body, and then another life will develop. She said, instead, take the child, feed them, and then walk them to the nearest agency that will house them. And that was one of the best lessons that I could have learned. And that's what I did from that point on. Fortunately now you don't see packs of children in Cambodia like you did. And that blue sign is from Sweden, which is a brilliant approach. There in Sweden, the sex worker is not victimized. The John who had the audacity to think that he could buy a body is. They go to jail. She goes in for help. And that's how it should be. Next. So here I am in Cambodia, and I'm with the far corner. You see a cluster of us. I'm with girls who have graduated the program who are now mothers and have babies. So two of them are managers of the Apron Project, and one is Kim with the light blue collar and blue shirt, and Rin with the pink on with the little girl Sapiti in front of her. Above me is me with Somali at an event. And then the other side is at a shelter, which I went to for the first 8 years. That's Somali in the center, and Sidlin to her right, who's also a survivor. And then the bottom is Somali. Next. These are the projects we've done over the years. The first year we made dolls. Where did I get the idea from dolls? Well, Jessica, the therapist at Cases, would work with the girls. And one of the first projects she did with them is she'd buy a blank doll, and one side of the doll would be who they are now in their life, and the reverse side of the doll would be who they were. And these girls would work on these dolls 3 or 4 months, and these were tough, innocent kids, and they'd melt down in front of a doll and begin to really elaborate who they are right now in life and what they want to be. And it was such a beautiful project, and I observed it, that I thought one day I'd do it. So in teaching art and life as a skill, I was doing Zuri slippers, and I brought a globe in one day to the classroom and showed them where Cambodia was. And you can go to the next image. And on that globe, I showed them where Cambodia was. And then I read to them a story that I had read about Somali mom in Glamour magazine getting an award. And next slide. And I said to them, you know something? I'm going to Cambodia. And they said, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to do the same thing I do with you guys. I teach you art as a skill. We take something that you would potentially use as a weapon, and we turn it into a tool, and we make something beautiful. Well, I'm going to go do the same things with these girls. And the girls that I was working with at that time got really, really silent, very, very quiet, a scary silent. And I ran and got Jessica and said, I think I need your help in the room. And she came and she stood and observed. And she said, tell me what you're feeling. And she said, Sana's going to Cambodia. Do you see what Cambodia is on the globe? They said, yes. She said, how long will it take you to get there, Sana? I said, 21 hours. And how much will it cost you? $1,200. And when are you going? I said, maybe in 6 months, I have to save $1,200. And then they said, what are you going to do with them? And I said, I'm not sure. I just need to go. They said, why don't you take dolls, Sana? Take dolls from us to them. We had our chances playing with dolls, but they never played with dolls, Sana. And so I took the doll project the first year, and we were delighted to make dolls. And as you can see them. They're wonderful dolls. You can go back one just to show them again because I talk so much. There's one of them, that big barrel chest. The other one, its eye is lower than the other one. Let's see if there's another one. They were wonderful. We never laughed so much making these dolls. And our language was not English. Our language was not Khmer. Our language was our heart. Our language was our smiling. Our language was our touching. Our language was our eating together. Our language was the tools that we had in front of us that were making beautiful, beautiful dolls. Okay, let's go. And also in the shelters, I would do other projects as well. I did felted flowers. I did sculpted books. Most of the projects that I did, go back one, most of the projects I did, this is important to know, is I did them where several girls worked on one at a time, because each one of these girls you're seeing now, which is 1, 2, 3, 4 girls to my left, because they were all taken from 4 different brothels. They don't know each other. What is Somali doing is she's rekindling another kind of sisterhood and family. These girls in their healing time in the shelters, which can range from 3 months to 5 years at one point, are becoming sisters and family to each other forever. So I bring projects there that fit within the ideology of how the girls are going to live. So I take projects where they would be able to keep doing the projects whether Sana is there or not. Books can be found, paper can be found. And I also do things where one needs the other. These women will help each other give birth. These women will help each other through struggle. These women will be sisters for the rest of their lives. So this is something very, very important about community and healing together. And at one point they stayed 3 to 5 years and got all kinds of training: dance, martial arts, fish farming, weaving, singing, cooking, hairdressing, mechanics, all kinds of skills. It was wonderful. Those were the days when I got up at 5 in the morning and would get to the camp at 7 and leave at 7 in the evening so that I would get back to my hotel 9 o'clock and crash by 10. I loved being there. I never felt tired. Next. This Unspeakable series is speaking about female excision, a beautiful ritual that has horrible consequences for women in many parts of the world. It's not just Africa. It's a ritual that was prevented to keep men from raping women initially, and then it became multi-purposed and multi-meaning and multicultural. But one of the first primary reasons that I read and learned from people who practice this is that, number one, prevention from rape. Our husbands historically would go to hunt. We'd gone away for weeks, 3 weeks to get water. They'd leave us women. Neighboring tribes would come and rape us. Once a woman is raped and is carrying the blood of another tribe, she's insignificant. She just as well walk into the bush and die. And a lot of circumstances, women are victimized either way, but I'm just saying there is light in the story. And so circumcision began. And then another way was hygiene. Nomadic tribes where water was not frequent, a woman giving birth without water being able to clean and cut down on bacteria infections. And then it goes on and goes on into some other things that are not as healing as the reason why I approach the work. These are small scale pieces, but initially when I started to build them, they were the scale of my face. It was my intention to take a story as a world traveler, as a young woman seeing things in other places, and bring these stories home to my audience to share what is happening in the life of a girl in another place right now. So my work was a storytelling from where I was, because all of my education from City College was happening from traveling around the world. It was no longer sitting in a classroom. I no longer trusted the classroom. I didn't get Sana there. I found Sana on the road. Next. These are the original ones that were very, very large scale, and they're talking about different procedures that were done historically by many groups of people to women. Next. Small scale pieces, and the one on the red is a very, very new piece where I'm integrating cloth and glass. Next. Very, very new work. The work is taking on something a little lighter as I look at it now than before. Sometimes the work was scary to look at. This work here is more celebratory, but if you stand in front of it and look for a long time, I think you still get the same impact. I'm just telling the story in a different way. I return to series every now and then, and for the last 10 years, I've been working on probably 4 or 5 different series because I kind of lost an audience without being able to get into any shows. So I began to just return to work, and change them. Next. These are very, very old pieces. I started the series 19 years after having lived the experience in West Africa. So I spent a lot of time thinking, reading, and traveling to understand something that was beyond my cultural boundaries, and an interest to learn, to explore, not to condemn or to criticize. Next. These are new pieces. And this is the Apron Project. I think probably in my 8th year of working in the shelters, or the safe houses, as I call them, the residents, as Somali calls them, there were groups, can we go back? There were groups of girls who were rescued later on in their life. And these are them. These girls here, when I met them, they were probably about 13 or 14 instead of 9 or 7, 8, and sometimes 4 that I see now. They were older. When a girl is rescued, and even older, one girl was 17 that was folding a book. When they're rescued this late, even though they go through a lot of the training, it's very, very difficult for them to succeed when they come out of Somali's care because of their age. Because they may not read and write as well as the girl who was able to be rescued at 9 that sat into a classroom. They may not know math well enough. So these girls leave the shelters and they fail. Not fail, but they fall is a better word. Excuse me for saying fail. They fall, and there's no safety net to pick them up. And all of us here today are lucky in that we did things growing up at 13 and 14 and 15. But what helped us each time is we had a safety net that caught us. That safety net could have been a neighbor or the bus driver or a friend or a cousin or uncle that said, you can't do that and get away. Well, these girls don't have a safety net. So sometimes when money runs out and they don't have a skill and they can't read and write because they got rescued at 19, 20, 21, sex work is the only work in this country for them. So I became particularly concerned about this population of girls because I spent the most time with them and I wondered where they were. And so after I hunted 1 or 2 down, they led me to 2 or 3 more. And then I decided I'm going to start a project with them to sustain them. And that became the Apron Project. And I think I started it in 2009. And so I work with 8 girls. We can go to the next image. I work with 8 girls. I give 8 girls at least 10 to 15 aprons to do per year for me. I pay them half of the money then for the apron. The price is not what I offer, it's what they say they want. These girls are trained as tailors. They are making clothing for other people as well. So I go in initially and say, how much do you want for this apron? The apron idea came across from my mom. My mom was a domestic, and once she had to go to work and came home very sad because she had to wear a uniform that she didn't like. And so that weekend she made a beautiful, beautiful pinafore and she wore that to work. And the woman of the house loved it and said, that she would never, ever ask my mother to wear a uniform. Well, every January 3rd is my mother's death. She's been dead 40 years. And I'm in another country that time of the year because it's winter break. And I usually stop that day and try to go near water. I'm a fire sign to calm my spirit down. And I think of her and I speak to her. And I took her apron with me and I said, why don't I start a project? I spoke to each girl. We said yes, and the Apron Project developed. Those boxes you see standing behind are what the aprons will be packed in. Every January 20th, I'm coming home with 100 aprons. And these are the girls working. You can go through the next images. So here we are together at night. We sometimes have a barbecue, which is a lot of fun. They come, many of them are mothers, they're 31, they're 32, they're 34. You see a strand of gray hair coming. You see them looking in the mirror all the time. They're wonderful, they're wonderful. They're my chosen daughters. I love every one of them. Next. And these are the aprons that they produce. What I do is all year round when I have time here, I gather fabric. It's recycled fabric. It's old. I live in the house I grew up in. And so I took old sheets because I'm one person here, old coats, everything, and cut it up, pin pockets on, and then go there with the patterns. We get the zippers, and then I give each girl some. So I used to be very, very organized going. Now I just put a bunch of fabric into luggage and go if I don't have the time. But organizing it is a lot better because then I have more rest time. So these are a bunch of the aprons and the pinafores. The aprons came about because I wanted everybody to want to wear them, and I couldn't sell the pinafores as much. So I began to do the both. And now I'm not even doing aprons or pinafores anymore because I have, I'm sure, at least 200 of them. We're now making handbags, and there's a box I'll show you in the living room of 5 boxes that just came 2 weeks ago that are full of handbags, and I'll put them on a site in a couple of months. So we're going to be making handbags from this point on. Next, I think I have some images of them. And this is when I'm at the safe houses. Sometimes I feel lonesome that I don't go there anymore, that I go into Phnom Penh and I do a little bit of touristing, do some language classes and meet some friends, but I don't go way up in the mountains where the children are. And I started missing them and I started saying, Sana, they need to see you too. So for the last 2 years, I started going back to them before I travel 7 hours to see and reap where my Apron Project is. So this is when we were doing dream catchers one year. And I'm, camouflaging their faces to protect them. You can see the one that in my arms. I mean, that is the year she would let me hold her. The year before that and the year before, she wouldn't let me touch her. She was too young. Maybe she's 3 years old, but she's delighted that I'm taking her fingers and making a mandala with her. So I love when I go there. I love when I go there. I just don't go often enough because doing both is very, very hard. Next. And this is just an image of, you go to Cambodia for one thing. I went to work with Somali and the 291 girls that she had at a time. And when I got there, I got there on their Independence Day, and me and Jessica didn't know what to do. And this guy on a motorbike came by and said, would you like to visit an orphanage? To make a long story short, he took us shopping to places that, of course, robbed us and charged us twice the amount for rice. But I caught on to it and said, I'll buy 1/8 of that instead. He didn't like that. But anyway, going to an orphanage, I met Shrenik. Now, Shrenik is that little girl in the top with the kind of golden whitish blouse. And I did a project with them waiting for Somali's organization to open. And this little girl clung to me for the 3 days that I went, to one finger, never said anything, just clung to me and clung to me and clung to me. And then one day I said, okay, you guys, I'm gonna go work on my project. And she pulled my finger and said, will you come back? Just like that. I didn't even know she could talk. And I looked at her face and I said, sure. And I said it really half-heartedly because I came to Cambodia to work with Somali, not to work at an orphanage. And so I said lightly, sure. And she yanked my finger. I'll never forget it. She yanked it and she said, you sure? And at that point I made eye to eye. And that little girl I fell in love with, her name is Shrenik. And I would go to the orphanage every year and spend time with her. Every year I went, another family member was there. This is the room that I would visit them in. I would talk to them about their dreams. And then I put her in a language school. And in 2016, she left the school because she had a mom. Most children in orphanages in poor countries do have moms, and mom sent her to work. And I found somebody that found her for me, and I've never laid eyes on her again, but she has my email, she has my number, she knows I love her. One day again, I'll see Shrenik, but that's Shrenik there. Next. And here are my lovely comrades in the fight against sex trafficking. These three women grew up in brothels. These three women were liberated by brothels, rescued. They were given love. They were given medicine. They were given treatment. They were given skills. They went on to universities. They found husbands that loved them, that care nothing about their history and their mothers. So these are the women that I return to each year to work with. And in the middle is Nora, who's the youngest. Nora, maybe now I'm 21 years old, but she's the one that picks me up from my guest house and escorts me to work with the girls that are the most needy. And the smiles in their faces are smiles that were always there. They were just buried by an ugly, ugly, ugly system that doesn't value women and doesn't educate it. And they're free from that now. And they work for Somali. Whether there's 3 months of money when it doesn't come in or not, they're by her side 24/7. So we are all of us are sisters and comrades in fight against trafficking, not only in Cambodia, but also in New York City where I live. Next. And here are the girls from the Apron Project. Here are my girls. They come and if they got babies, they have to work with the babies that are with them. Sometimes when I'm there, our plan is to get started at 7 and work until 7. The idea is they get about a bundle of 12 things and they have to do 2 there with me so I can see the skill level, and then they can go off to their homes. And so we sit there for 2 days and laugh. And it's really funny when I grab their husbands, because their husbands will come and attempt to drive off. And I say, oh, wait a minute, we need you. And they'll come out and say, oh, yes. And I'll put the baby in his arm and walk away. And the girls put their heads right down to the machine. And when the machine is over, when the husbands sit down and start playing with the kids, they say, we never see before. I said, imitate, imitate. Next. Next. And here's the girls, the project I did last year, and that's Nora in the corner. She does not have to have her face protected because she's an adult woman. She grew up as a survivor. She is now university educated. And she says to me, I may not be the smartest, but I'm the hardest worker in my classroom. So she's trying to get her master's degree. And she works for Somali. And this year we made masks so that they can have decorative masks so that when they go public or go to court or visitors come, you can't identify them. We're protecting them from their future employer, and we're also protecting them from the parents who may want to get them, the cousins, the uncle, or the pimps who might have had some of them. These are the youngest population. Next. This is my series on girl soldiers, and this came about having lived in West Africa many years ago in Sierra Leone, where civil war broke out, and it also reminds me of Cambodia. This is what bodies look like in the killing fields. And usually next to that body is a shoe, a brim of a hat, a broken watch, something that held on when the body didn't. So that's what we have here, bodies frozen in a time of decay, but something stayed alive. Next. Next. And these are some dolls that I'm playing around with now. I'm actually working on 2 series of dolls, but I call these I See Me dolls because growing up, I grew up in the 50s and Black dolls didn't really exist. And when they did exist, they cost a whole lot of money. And I have 4 sisters. So my parents could only buy 1 per year. And all of us had to share that 1 doll and play with it. And so there was once a little story about who was pretty, who's not pretty, what's pretty in Black, what's not pretty in Black. And growing up in an international community and being brown girls weren't considered pretty girls. And an international community where you had honey-colored eyes and blondish hair and kinky curls, brown girls just weren't on the list. And so my mother made a doll one day for me, and she said, this doll looks like you, and this doll's beautiful. And you look at this doll, and you'll know it yourself as always being beautiful. So I began to make them when I found that little crude wooden doll. The legs swing, the hands are glass, and the hair is shooting up all over your head like my hair did when I was a little girl. Next. And this is my latest series, The Topsy-Turvy. It may be the longest series I've ever worked on. I think I've been working on it for about 8 years, and it may be another 4 or 5. I just don't have the uninterrupted time once I'm here to do it, but time will be coming. I'm looking forward to cutting back on my work schedule and retiring very, very soon. So I will be able to, but these topsy-turvy dolls, which I'm gonna show you in the studio, have two views. And they have a wonderful story about history where a slave mother was resilient and made her daughter, a doll with two faces, one with a white face, one with a black doll, and warned her, when the master was around, you have to show the white face because little slave children aren't supposed to have dolls. He'll assume you're playing with his daughter's doll. And when that slave master's not there, mommy wants you to see your face. So I had one of those in our family, and I began to make them, but instead of them being the narrative of slavery, they're the narrative of powerful women in my life. So there's Coretta King and Billie Holiday, Lena Horne, just a bunch of them. I made about 40 of them. I'll show you some more in the studio. But upside down, there's a whole nother girl underneath them. So that's the current series, as well as the I See Me dolls. I'm still working on them. And I'm also working on the Killing Fields. Next. These are the pieces on the Killing Fields. This is what the Killing Fields looks like. It doesn't have this perimeter of brown around it, but that is my way of creating earth. But this is what people go to, particularly during a ceremony once a year, where they still are looking for the remains. The Civil War wasn't that long. I don't think it was 40 years ago. So people who haven't put closure are still looking for a brother, a sister, one that might have joined the army to survive, one who fought the army. But when you go to the killing fields and you go with Native people, you go early in the morning, you go to areas that they don't let tourists go, this is what you see. You see a skeletal remain, and then you'll see this vibrant earth that pierces through it. It's so incredibly shocking and beautiful and sad at the same time. I began to do a series about it. I don't think that I'll stay with it long, but I'm doing it now. Next. This is some other details of it. Next. And I'll end with that. I've been marching every time that I can. And I love that this woman had this sign. And I often think of us as women as being mommies on so many levels, whether we birth them or not. Those girls in Cambodia are my chosen daughters. I have nieces, I have grandnieces. Little girls are special to me. Thank you very much, you guys.